Oh, dear. So Kyle Kulinski decided to cover Dr. West's conversation with Sean Hannity. It was really interesting. Some of the things that he says, I agree with. Some of the things I very much disagree with. We're not going to go through the whole video, but there are a couple points that I do want to point out that I think needs to be said, and I think you need to hear it from someone who's a Black host. So let's go ahead and get into this discussion, because it's really interesting to me how people who are not a minority try to speak for minorities. So we're going to get into this.
Cornell West is running for president of the United States. Of course, now he's running with the Green Party. He's going to have to get through their primary first, but nonetheless, he will, likely get through it and then be on the ballot in the general election. Well, he went on Sean Hannity's show, and this is an interesting exchange that you're about to see here. He kind of triggers Hannity with a certain criticism of Trump, or more specifically, Trump's dad. Watch this.
And if Democrats really want to combat racism, sexism, well, they may want to start from within. After all, it was the Democratic Party that founded the KKK.
We have a bunch of professional right-wing commentators who rely on their audience not knowing what a political realignment is. It's astonishing. They play hide the ball with a basic political concept that perfectly explains why that was the case. There were racist Southern Democrats. They were called Dixiecrats. And then, where did they end up going, Sean? What are their voting habits like today and for the past, 4 or 5 decades? Oh, that's right. They're now Republicans. But he just does it's amazing. It's so dishonest because he knows this. He knows what a political realignment is. He knows that's a ridiculous talking point. Jesus.
So, yes, a political realignment did happen, but I think it's important that Kyle Kulinski needs to acknowledge that there are still racist Democrats. I think this talking point, and I've heard it for a long time, not just in mainstream liberal media, but also in left independent media, this idea that it's the Republicans who are the ones that are racist. First of all, everyone that's a Republican is not racist. And somehow this idea that people who are Democrats, there's no way they can possibly be racist. But there are racist Democrats. In fact, there are racist Democrats that live in the district that he grew up in the county that he grew up in Westchester County in New York. So I lived in New York. There are a lot of racist people in New York, in the city too, by the way, and in Westchester County. And they're Democrats. Kyle Kulinski leaves out the covert racism. He leaves out the people, and we've talked about this before on the show, he leaves out the people who say they support Black Lives Matter, and they may even have the sign in the window of their apartment or their home or their yard, but they don't want Black people moving into their neighborhood. If you look at a city like New Rochelle, for example, very diverse, very diverse, right? But talk to Black people who grew up in New Rochelle and they'll tell you just how racist New Rochelle can be. You see what I'm saying? This idea that, oh, yes, there were these Southern Democrats and yes, and they moved over to the Republic. They became the Republican Party. And yeah, so the racists are in the Republican Party. No, there's still racists in the Democratic Party, too. And this is something that people like Kyle Kulinski don't want to point out, because then you have to admit that the Democratic Party is a little racist towards people, too. The covert racism, and some of it's just blatant racism. Okay? Just because you have a D next to your name doesn't mean you cool with everybody in all colors and all shades. Just because you have a D next to your name doesn't mean that you also don't call Black people the N-word too when they not around in your face. These are the kind of things that I've seen. And you typically see it. He's talking about the Southern, There's a lot of racism right here in the North too, okay? There's racism here in Massachusetts. There's racism in New York. There's racism in Connecticut, all New England, all of this jazz. There's a lot of racist people here too. Let's stop pretending like the racists are just these Republicans that live in the South or live in the sticks in the Midwest somewhere, or just out there in the middle of nowhere. The whole damn country, for the most part, every state has racism. No state is immune to it. And no political party, this two-party system, these Democrats and these Republicans, they're not immune to racism either. Just because you have a D next to your name doesn't mean that you're not racist. But see, Kyle Kulinski, he don't want to say that though. He don't want to get into that. He don't really understand that experience because he's white. Let's just keep it real. He might have been around some of those white Democrats in Westchester County that made some of them racist remarks, and he might have just shrugged it off. But see, they won't tell you that. Let's go on.
Christ.
They're the ones that fought against school integration and are now fighting against school choice.
To be fair, it's true that Joe Biden, it says on screen, Joe Biden didn't compromise with segregationists. He fought for their cause in schools, experts say. That's actually true. That's actually true. Now, a lot of Republicans also agreed with Joe Biden on that. They agreed with him doing the crime bill. A lot of them voted for it. But that part is accurate.
Biden himself.
But Biden co-wrote the crime bill. You see what I'm saying? And these are the kind of things I started to notice along the way. You know, Kyle used to be heavily critical against Joe Biden, especially when he was running in 2020 and Bernie was in the race. He was very critical of Joe Biden and his history. Very critical of that. Everything changed after Joe Biden won. All of a sudden, it was Joe Biden is Dark Brandon. He's very progressive. He's doing all these things and da-da-da. Why the change? Why the change? When I tell you that Joe Biden is a segregationist, it's based on things that he's passed legislatively. It's based on legislation that he co-wrote. It's based on policies that he's passed. When I tell you that Joe Biden wasn't nice to women either, and this is another thing they want to just say is part of the right. All you got to do is go back and look at the testimony of Anita Hill and listen to the way that Joe Biden spoke to her. Listen to how Joe Biden said that her witnesses could not testify. Let's stop pretending like that was 50 years ago. That wasn't that long ago. So let's stop pretending here that Joe Biden, because he's a Democrat, that he's actually for the women and for Black people and all that kind of jazz. He showed you exactly who he was his entire political career. And the only reason that Barack Obama chose him for vice president was to win over white moderates. Let's keep it real. Let's go on.
Worked with segregationists, including his mentor, the former Klansman.
It's true. He did it on busing. That is true, but it's just very rich coming from Sean Hannity because he's actually even worse on all these issues.
He didn't want his kids to grow up in a, quote, racial jungle. And in 1993, it was Biden that co-sponsored the crime bill that resulted.
Sean Hannity supports the crime bill. He's not telling you that. Joe Biden did this terrible thing that I totally agree with. Dude, you consider yourself tough on crime. You love something like the crime bill. What are you doing?
But we already know that. We know that because of the party that he's in. We know typically the Republican Party backs the police. They're tough on crime. Typically, not all of them, but typically, we already know that. Why are you telling people something that's already obvious to the majority of your audience, which are mainly liberals and progressives anyway? This is the part that is really weird to me. How many people in the audience know the shit that Joe Biden did? And I'm talking about some of the things that have not been said. Let's talk about it. Has Tara Reid been on this show? She's been on my show multiple times. Let's go on.
But when it's to attack, see, this is the whole point, man. No principles. When it's to attack Biden, it's like he'll just bury the fact that he supports that same legislation. It's just dishonest. This is what he does. This is what he does.
He can bury it because people already know. What do you mean? There's nothing to bury. He's very vocal about what he believes and what he stands for. The audience already knows that.
Mass incarceration of African Americans who Biden referred to as predators on our streets. Left-wing scholar Dr. Cornell West is now openly accusing Biden of committing crimes against humanity against African Americans. Dr. West is seeking the Green Party's nomination for president in 2024.
Now, let me just explain to you real quick what's going on here. This is Fox News is clever. They're very clever with how they approach politics. The goal for them is 24/7 beat up on Democrats. And so they will even bring somebody on who is to the left of the Democrats to attack the Democrats from a left-wing perspective because they don't care how you're attacking the Democrats as long as you're attacking the Democrats.
But you'll never see Kyle talk to those types of people. Now he's talked to Dr. West, like especially during the Bernie days and stuff like that. He probably will talk to Dr. West again because they do have that type of relationship. But you don't see Kyle talk to those people to the left of the Democratic Party. When do you see Kyle will go talk to Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, all these right-wing hosts? He'll go talk to them. But when do you see Kyle talk to someone to the left of him? Do you see Kyle talk to people like Aaron Mate? And I mean, strictly just on foreign policy. You ain't even got to get into all the domestic, just strictly someone to the left of you on foreign policy. Do you see those people come on secular talk? Do you see Aaron Mate on there? Do you see Max Blumenthal on there? Margaret Kimberly? Danny Haiphong? How come you don't bring those people on to have these conversations? Why is it that you're willing? This is the part that cracks me up. You complain about the channels that focus on criticizing the Democratic Party and not really focusing on criticizing the Republican Party, but you in turn will go have conversations with those same conservatives that you smear, but you won't have those conversations with people to the left of you. What's that really about? These are the things I want people to start paying attention to. Now, to the point of Fox News, yeah, they'll bring people on to crash and like smash the Democratic Party. But even when people do come on there and they're asked about the Democratic Party and they're smart about it and they trash both parties, I've seen Jimmy Dore trash both parties and say they're both corporate and corrupt. Even when that happens, people like Kyle Kulinski in that side of the internet will smear those people anyway. They'll purposely cut out that part of the interview so that people don't see it on their screen and make it seem like that person just went on there to kiss up to Tucker Carlson when Tucker was hosted on Fox. They'll cut that part out. You guys know exactly who I'm talking about. Oh, I've seen all this stuff. They'll just show to make it seem like that person is now right wing, and they'll totally omit the part when the person says both parties are corrupt. Let's go on.
The substance doesn't matter to them. What matters first and foremost is just attack Democrats. So it's a trick, it's a strategy, and honestly, it works pretty well. Now, they try to do the same thing with Marianne. You know, they invite on Marianne, and they're like, why don't you go ahead and tell us how Biden's brain is not functional? And so this way they can go, see, even the left agrees his brain isn't functional. So it's all a strategy. It's all a trick. It's a very effective trick. But what Marianne did is Marianne would be like, look, I'm not playing your game. I'm not doing personal attacks. I'll talk about where I disagree with Biden on policy. I'm not going to get personal. But more importantly, for all my disagreements with Biden, I have way more disagreements with you, Sean Hannity. And
that's actually not what Marianne said. I covered that interview when Marianne went on Sean Hannity. Yeah, she said she wasn't going to make personal attacks, but she did not say I have more disagreements with you, Sean Hannity. She did not say that. So why is he trying to make it seem like she was more amplified than she was?
Fox News and Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis, as bad as Biden is, you guys are significantly worse, and it's not even close. Not even close. So Cornell West goes on, and to his credit, he does the same thing as Marianne. He's like, okay, y'all go after Biden a little bit, but let's not forget, you guys are just as bad, if not worse. All right, let's watch.
Always good.
But the question that I think Kyle should be asking is, why isn't liberal media inviting these voices on? Think about that. Now, Cornell West is in that lucky spot where he's very well known, so CNN cannot ignore like Cornell West. Plus, they do consider him to be a big threat. They can't ignore him. They just can't. So they've had him on. But I'm talking about some of the other voices. You know, why did they ignore people like Jill Stein? Why do they ignore people like Glenn Greenwald? For the people who say Glenn Greenwald's right wing because he only goes on Fox News. He's not invited on those other networks. I've interviewed Glenn Greenwald and I asked him that question. So it's just, this is a big part of the problem. Here's the thing. Kyle knows that because Kyle also is not invited on those networks. Think about that. Think about it. I think he was on one time. I remember one time, I can't remember, it was CNN or Fox. I think it was Fox. that he was invited onto. But Kyle also wasn't invited onto those networks. So he knows that.
Good to have you back. How are you, my friend?
Oh, indeed. I appreciate you having me back and hope you and your family are doing all right. It's been a while, my brother.
I love when you call me Brother Sean. You're always welcome to do so. You are saying that Biden committed crimes against humanity against black Americans, and you said his record on race issues, and you called out the Democratic Party's history. Let me ask you this. Why overwhelmingly do minorities and African Americans, Hispanic Americans, why are they still continuing to vote in large numbers in the Democratic Party?
Because they're a trillion times better than Republicans, and we have a two-party system. We don't have rank.
Wrong. So here is the white guy trying to speak for minorities. Let's let him finish, because I have a lot to say here. Boy, I tell you.
Party's history. Let me ask you this. Why overwhelmingly do minorities and African Americans, Hispanic Americans, why are they still continuing to vote in large numbers in the Democratic Party?
Because they're a trillion times better than Republicans, and we have a two-party system. We don't have ranked choice voting. We still have first-past-the-post voting. So either the Republican or the Democrat is going to win, and minority communities have accurately come to the conclusion, oh, the Democrats are just way better.
What do you know about minority communities? What minority community have you lived in? What do you know about? No, that's actually not how it works. And hey, I've been on both sides. So let me tell you why this happens. Number one, first and foremost, the majority of Black Americans don't vote. Surprise! The majority do not. Two, the ones that do, it's typically older Black people. People 60 and up, 55, 60 and up. Typically older Black people that progressively go out and vote. Now, why do they tend to always vote for the Democratic Party? One reason is because of fear. There's a lot of fear base that comes into the Black community, and it's done via the church, the Black church. That's the big one. This is why people like Jim Clyburn is able to still continue to win, because he has that hold and that power in the Black church. So if you have that hold and that respect with the Black church, oh yeah, you can win. So who is more likely to go to church? Older Black voters, not younger Black voters. So if older Black voters going to church every Sunday, and then sometimes you got Bible study, maybe on Wednesday. I know I grew up in the church. And the pastor is in bed with the politician, the Democrats who are running. Then the pastor let the Democrat candidates come to the church on Sunday during the sermon, tell you how you should vote for them, how they're going to help the community. And the majority of the Black Democrats that are elected don't do anything for the Black community. But people continue to vote for the Democratic Party because of, one, fear that if you don't vote for them, the Republican Party is going to take everything away from you, even though behind your back, the Democrats still taking things away from you too. We'll get into that in just a second. And two, you have to look at who is actually voting in the Black community. So you have a lot of people, Democrat candidates, they come into the Black church and they get the church behind them, and that's how they get a lot of their support. Kyle doesn't know that. I don't know why he's trying to speak for with the minority stuff. Not lived in no minority community. He is not a minority. But it just kills me. For the longest time, this has been the narrative. For the longest time in left independent media, it's mainly just been people listening to white guys like Kyle try to speak for everybody, even communities he knows nothing about. And people believe it. Let's go on.
They're just way better. Like 98% of the Republican Party wants to cut Social Security, wants to cut Medicare, wants to cut Medicaid, and the Democrats don't.
Didn't Joe Biden just cut Medicaid? Didn't Joe Biden just cut Medicaid?
Some of them do, but the overwhelming majority of them don't. So maybe that's why. Maybe because they're better on a lot of substantive issues. No, that's not.
The majority of Black Americans. See, this is the thing. When we talk about even things like Medicaid, we talk about things like Medicare. Think about all the Black voters that don't have any type of health care, no type of health insurance. Go into some of these, maybe give Kyle a microphone, get him out of the studio, send him to the hood, and ask him to interview Black people in those communities and ask them what those Democrats have been doing for them. I'll tell you, go to Baltimore. Go to Baltimore, where my parents grew up, in the hood, and ask the people in Baltimore how the Democrats have helped them in their community. They ain't done a damn thing for them. You go back to Baltimore, every time I go back, it still look the same. It still look the same. Buildings that still torn down. Nobody tried to rebuild it. The rubble just sits there. Nothing. No progress, nothing. Some of the neighborhoods have gotten worse. And every time Democrats in power, usually Black Democrats in power, usually the mayor has been a Black Democrat. And who do they help? Not the Black people in those neighborhoods. Those neighborhoods get worse. This is what I'm trying to tell you. But Kyle know everything. He know about minorities.
I'd say they're good. Let's not say they're perfect. They're far from it. But if you do an objective empirical analysis as to whose policies help regular working class people of color more, it's not.
People in the hood, working class regular folk, are not trying to think about no damn empirical analysis. Nobody cares about that shit. When I go back home to visit my relatives, they're just trying to get up and go to work. Get up, go to work, and figure out if they're going to pay the light bill. They ain't got time for no damn empirical analysis. What the fuck is this? You see how clueless they are? So clueless. Let's go back a little bit because we'll finish with this point here.
A lot of substantive issues. Now, that's not to say they're good. That's not to say they're perfect. They're far from it. But if you do an objective empirical analysis as to whose policies help regular working class people of color more, it's not close. It's not close. So that's why, Sean, that's why they do it. Jesus.
So that's why people still poor and struggling and living in the projects? Because the Democrat policies have helped them so much. That's why they still stuck at these schools that are underfunded, that are under-resourced. People still struggling to pay bills in those communities. That's why. Because their policies, Democrat policies, have helped them so much. At the end of the day, both of these parties are corporate. Both parties care about money and not people. And Kyle Kulinski knows that. Focusing primarily on Democrat versus Republican, that's easy. Focusing on the class perspective and how both parties screw over the worker, that's the more difficult part. Because see, now you can't tell your audience to come out and vote for the Democrat. Which is what they run on. Malcolm X said something about this once. Maybe you should hear it. Listen to this.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you're dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race. And what kind of alibi do they come up with? They try and pass the buck to the Dixiecrats. Now, back during the days when you were blind, deaf, and dumb, ignorant, politically immature, naturally you went along with that. But today, as your eyes come open and you develop political maturity, you're able to see and think for yourself. And you can see that a Dixiecrat is nothing but a Democrat in disguise.
One more time, the first part.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you're dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Well, but Kyle won't play nothing like that. He don't want to play that. That's a little too spicy for his audience. Anytime you still going around supporting this party and they ain't done nothing for you, you're a traitor. That was Malcolm X. You're a traitor to your own damn people. They don't play stuff like that, though. The Kyle side of the internet, they're not going to play these speeches from Malcolm X or Martin Luther King when they told you that the liberal was a problem, when they told you to beware of the white moderate. They don't play those things. Wouldn't go too well with their audience who still believes you can reform the Democratic Party. Let's keep it real. I'm going to go to some of the comments and then we'll go into Tennessee. Shout out to Christina for becoming a Sabby member. Whoop, 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 whoop. Thank you, Janice. Does he have the thin blue line flag behind him? I don't think so. No. Oh, you might have been talking about something else. Thank you, Victor. Kyle's gone full blue MAGA. Yeah, man. I can't believe I used to listen to some of these people. Thank you, Goba44. Be nice. Marianne gave Kyle a nice wedding gift. Thank you, Sir Bikes a Lot, for the super chat. Sir Bikes a Lot is cute. Thank you for this as well. Kyle Kulinski is the new Rush Limbaugh for Dems. Yeah, man. I'm going to tell you, if you out here like simping for the Democratic Party, oh, your channel will grow like that. Trust, boo. They like it.